You may recall in the testimony of the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, I was repeatedly trying to get basic information regarding whether or not there was notes available prepared for this committee. Currently, I'll share with you that the only way that we could get that was through an ATIP. And so we did file for the ATIP. And then we just found out that they're going to request another 90 days to be able to provide this basic information. And so again, I just want to underscore the need for this committee to have the ability to demand for documents in a timely way, which is why I think something like this that would give them a timeline on it would hopefully help avoid future instances where people are just, in my opinion, obstructing this committee from being able to do its basic work.
The Emergency Act is back in session. The committee is finally back to discuss what they need to move forward. They all agree that they need all documentation that the courts have that warranted the Emergency Act invocation. Here's the clip.
Move.
Ouais.
Not to replace, to be clear, Mr. Chair? I would allow the movers to argue why they believe it would be important to bring the PCO back before this. In my opinion, procedurally, it seems to be alluding to the same type of obstruction that we dealt with in the previous motion. But I would, however, like to have a process in place where when documents are submitted by the government in court proceedings and become public.
Vous avez expliqué, Monsieur Green.
Mr. Green, you explained this earlier, but I just wanted to clarify the amendment that you're suggesting. The wording would be what? What are you doing as an amendment?
Est-ce que je peux poser une question?
Could I ask a question for clarification purposes? Yes, go ahead.
Suggesting that all publicly available documents be available to this committee from the court proceedings.
Correct.
And your proposed could that be proposed in a separate motion, because I think
I'm happy to do that at a later time. I'll take it back, Mr. Chair, and I'll draft it. And
Merci, Monsieur Green.
I'll make sure it's in both official languages as well, Mr. Chair.
Vous me simplifiez la vie. Merci.
Thank you. You're making my life easier. Thank you, Mrs. Boniface. And then Mr. Motz. Hang on.
Oui, ça prend le consentement unanime.
We need unanimous consent to withdraw Mr. Green's proposed amendment. Yeah, okay. Mrs. Boniface.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I find this, and maybe it would be helpful if Mr. Motz actually speaks first, because I find this confusing and was more convoluted once Mr. Green spoke, because I think we may have covered it in another motion. So I'm really finding this one difficult to understand what we're asking for, and maybe particularly when I see at the end, among other things, that could be a range, and perhaps it's helpful if Mr. Motz speaks.
Madame Boniface. Monsieur Motz.
I'll defer some of this to my colleague, Mr. Brock, but I just want to explain that I agree with Mr. Green that having the Privy Council office, the clerk there, provide all documents to this committee is critical, and that's obviously the intent of this. But also, there needs to be some explanation on the clerk's part as to why, to help us understand why we don't get documents when we ask for documents. It makes no sense to me that the courts get them, and I'm sure that'll come up in Mr. Green's motion, but we can also add it here. And but it's the idea that we ask for these documents, as part of the May 31st order, and that we were not provided documents, and yet the Privy Council office sends certain documents to the Commission, and we don't have those, and they send documents to federal court on other matters in regards to the Emergencies Act that are before those courts, and yet we do not have those, and we're blocked from having them. I don't understand why, and I think the Clerk of the Privy Council needs to come to explain why. And that's also a comment that Mr. Green made earlier, is there needs to be some accounting somewhere, and maybe if someone of the stature of the Clerk of the Privy Council will recognize that, this committee has, an opportunity, a privilege to get access to the information that is available to other matters, to other situations or other venues, then we should be able to have them based on the order we got.
Merci, Monsieur Motz. Monsieur Brock.
All right, so I'm going to start off by seeking some direction from you, Mr. Chair, and the clerk, if necessary. Do I have the ability to seek a friendly amendment to this motion, notwithstanding my name is attached to the motion itself? I appreciate that.
Help you, I think.
Or perhaps my senator friend could help me. So that's fine. To Matthew's, to Mr. Green's point, in his kind suggestion about drafting a separate motion, which in my view deals with the substance or the substantive matter that we're trying to seek here, access to the documentation. Of course, it's very, very clear, given the media reports, that the clerk of the Privy Council has clearly relevant information for the purposes of this committee. So might I suggest, as a friendly amendment that could be put forth by my friend Senator Carignan, oh, and it's been drafted for me, thank you, that the committee invite...
Il faudrait le donner. Je vais donner la parole au sénateur.
I'm going to give the floor to Senator Carignan. If Senator Carignan is moving this...
Désolé, Monsieur Brock.
Sorry, Mr. Brock.
Il ne peut pas le faire.
Ouais, OK. OK, alors...
Friendly amendment to read that the committee invite the clerk of the Privy Council to appear before the committee to discuss the production of documents, including claims of cabinet confidence. Is that confidence for the committee and other proceedings related to the public order emergency.
That's a very good idea. I move that.
Mr. Brani. Well,
ability to cross-examine on the answers to the interrogatories. I still don't see, pursuant to what Senator White has just mentioned, a limit on the number of questions. And I'll inject a third element here. Sometimes, and we know this works on both sides, that sometimes the questions you pose are in part cued or triggered by what you've heard from the other people around the table. So if something that I feel perhaps Mr. Brock has asked certain questions that have elicited certain types of testimony, I want to perhaps reply to that, respond to it, so I phrase my questions accordingly to elicit some sort of reply or response. That's the natural to and fro of a committee process. You are completely, that possibility is completely eliminated when we're not seeing the types of written interrogatories that are put to the witnesses after the fact. And I think that actually diminishes the quality of the kinds of evidence that we will hear. Merci.
Merci, Monsieur Virani. Monsieur Green.
Just in response to the honourable member with the fantastic bow tie, I would say that as a committee, we always have the ability, and quite rightly within our rights as a committee, to call witnesses back. So I'm unwilling to accept the argument that just because the questions are written and they go out, that there isn't an opportunity for cross-examination. If somebody we feel isn't being truthful or perhaps has provided contradictory testimony, we would always remain and retain the right as a committee to call them back to this function. And so, from my perspective, when you talk about the to and fro, I can share with you that many of the meetings that we've had to date have left me feeling pretty incomplete in terms of the opportunity to engage with people. And I think that it would actually be an opportunity for us to be less adversarial by allowing somebody an opportunity to clarify something that was said or provide information that they didn't have at hand, rather than take the position that we feel like maybe they weren't being truthful or maybe they were providing an obstruction in our own opinions, and then start and recapitulate a fight to drag them back before this committee. So I actually look at it in an opposite perspective, that this is an opportunity to prevent that by giving people the opportunity to reply in writing. And if we could I think, zero in on the number. I would agree with that critique, that if there was either by block or what have you, the opportunity to do that, 3 questions, something that was reasonable, I would be happy to support that. And then on the last point, look, we do have to get to a point where facts are established at this committee. And I'll just I'll continue to repeat that and identify in instances where we don't feel like we're getting that work done. And I think that this is a way to do that. So I hope that we can find a common ground on this and move forward. Thank you.